This is Marc Kramer, Senior Lecturer of Entrepreneurship at VinUniversity in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, I'm interviewing at our Asian Founders and Funders broadcast, Hieu Ngo Duc, Founder CEO of TigerList. Welcome.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. So before we talk about what TigerList is, why don't you tell us about your background and how you've arrived at this point?
Sure. So my name is Hieu Ngo Duc. I'm a software developer and angel investor from Germany. I lived in Germany for 30 years, and I've been working in the startup scene for over 20 years. I started my career very early, creating my first websites when I was 14 years old. When I was 16 years old, I created large online communities and forums with over 500,000 users. When I was 18, I studied economics and business and launched my first startups with 19 during university. Now I live in Vietnam and recently launched a new platform called tigerlist.com. Tigerlist is a platform for investors and startup founders in Southeast Asia. We provide a platform where founders can launch their products, help and meet each other, and connect directly with angel investors and VCs. We aim to become a hybrid of AngelList, Product Hunt, and Crunchbase, but for Southeast Asia.
So before we get into TigerList, obviously everybody's going to notice hear you're Vietnamese with a very thick German accent. Can you talk a little bit about where you grew up and how you acquired this accent?
Yes, so I was born in Hanoi, but I moved to Germany when I was 4 years old. I was one of the first Vietnamese pupils to ever go to a German school. I grew up in the area of Berlin, the capital of Germany, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about, okay, does it mean to be like a Vietnamese when you grow up among all the German friends? And I always had the dream of going back to Vietnam, and this is what I did after graduating and launching my own startups in Germany. And I saw that Germany and Europe as a whole region was stagnating. And I saw that the Asian market, especially Vietnam, was improving and developing rapidly. And this is why I decided this is now the time to go back.
What attracted you to entrepreneurship? Germany has had some successful entrepreneurs there, but they're mostly known as a big company kind of country. And in Vietnam, entrepreneurship is starting to grow here. We're way behind Singapore and some other countries in terms of creating unicorn companies, which I'm sure you're focused on your new venture. But what attracted you to entrepreneurship?
I think entrepreneurship or starts out as an idea. So a lot of creative people or people who like to be financially independent, they are thinking, okay, I don't want a 9 to 5 job. I want to maybe do something long term that not only fits my persona and my skills, but also maybe do something that is meaningful for themselves. And this is what I'm doing. I always had uh, had an affinity for education and for technology, and I wanted to find a product where I can combine those. And one of the areas I found fascinating was the emerging of the web technology that allowed you to create new products very cheaply without huge investment like real estate or having to hire expensive equipment. And this is why I went into tech startups.
And so, what's the best parts of being an entrepreneur, and what's the most challenging parts?
Um, the worst part of being an entrepreneur is that you don't really have a roadmap. As a startup founder, you are at least trying to build something new. So that means that by definition, you are often ahead of the curve or ahead of the market. So there's a lot of a challenge between you wanting to bring out a new technology or product that is based on new technology, but the market not having catched up to you. So there might be a product, but no demand. And the next challenging part is building actually the business network. So every new business model requires new partners and also new strategic partnerships that you aren't familiar with. And so you have to educate yourself on the new market and the industry and build relationships and go to events and actually do the networking part, which often for like technical people is not a part that they really like going to parties and mingling with other business owners. It is not what they do every day because they like to stay in the office. But this is also one of the cool parts of being an entrepreneur is like you meet so many people, not just the people that you meet in your office or in your work, because simply you have to go out and meet new people just to find new customers or partnerships.
What's the skills entrepreneurs need to have today to be successful in 2025?
That's a very deep question. It depends on the market. For example, Vietnam is divided in three areas. The northern area, which is more conservative and more political. Here, having the right network is extremely important. So, if you don't have a network because you start out like most students and entrepreneurs, the first thing you have to do is actually uh, try to find the first person you can talk to who can help you connect with the right person, right? And it is a bit different for like the southern market in Ho Chi Minh City, where it is more westernized. So in the southern area, you can have a great idea and a great product, and you simply meet people. And if they like your products, they will simply buy it. In the northern area, it is more you have to find the right people. You have to understand the organization chart. You have to know who is actually like having the power to decide in the company. And this is very important if you want to sell to government or institutions or larger companies that are partly owned by the government.
You starting Tiger List. Tell us more about Tiger List and what you're hoping to accomplish there, and when will it be, fully launched that entrepreneurs can take advantage of it?
Yeah, great. So one evening I was talking to my Korean and Japanese investor friends. We were having a drink, and they asked me, Hio, why is it so difficult to meet startup founders in Vietnam? I asked them, what do you mean? They are like literally everywhere. In every cafe, I see some startup founder. But it turns out that many investors are very frustrated because Vietnamese founders love to use Facebook. Vietnam actually jumped over the whole web part and they went straight to Facebook. Everything is sold over Facebook. Every community is on Facebook. But Facebook itself as a platform is actually a horrible place to launch a product. The post vanish after a few hours and are pushed down, or the groups are spammed with advertising. So investors or institutional investors really dislike the platform. And that is why I decided to build a platform from founders to founders where founders can help and share their journey with each other and also connect with investors and angel investors and small business owners who might become later like their strategic partner or angel investor.
So is this like online group fundraising? I mean, is there folks are going to meet on your platform, and does your organization, get a percentage of anything that they raise, or it's just connecting people?
Right now, we are In the first phase, we will build the product launch feature where startups can create a startup profile and also a founder profile because a lot of founders said that they had to send their CV over and over to investors. And nowadays they can just send their Tiger List profile where they already have all the information that the investor might need. And they also can launch the product directly on Tiger List and get variable feedback and user comments and also likes to see if the market actually has the need for something like that.
Uh, so, how many venture capitalists and angel groups are there in Vietnam? I'm not sure I can get a real number here like you can in the US.
Yes. So when I did a bit of digging, it was first very hard to quantify the number of investors who are active in Vietnam because there's a difference between native investors and like global investors who are active in Vietnam. A lot of VC funds and angel investors are also registered in Singapore because it is easier in Singapore for them to raise money from private equity. So if we look at the larger markets, the Southeast Asian markets, there are around over 3,000 venture capital firms for Southeast Asia alone.
Wow.
Yes, that's a lot. And most of them are zombie firms. And it is almost impossible for a new founder to know which fund is alive and which and has money and which fund is a zombie firm and acts like it is alive. This is one of the reasons why I'm building Tiger List to create also a vetted uh, and verified list of angel investors who are actually active and will participate in the Vietnamese market.
In the United States, back in the, let's say, up till the maybe 2005, there were seed stage venture funds that invested before you even had revenue. Now there's essentially nobody except in the biotech area because it takes so long to do it. And now all the seed raising is with angel investors, but now even angel investors are saying in the US, hey, show us some revenue because we have so many
Exactly.
choices to invest in that we don't
Exactly.
need to take the risk of somebody who hasn't proven out that the model actually works. How does that work here in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia?
So um, before Tigerlist, it was very difficult. You had to rely on personal network or business network, or maybe like former employer who could act like your angel investor, or maybe you had rich parents who were willing to help you with financing your startup. Um, Before Tigerlist, the usual way would be like you would go to an incubation program. Right now, we have Entla and Founder Institute. Those are the two big incubation programs in Vietnam. The government is planning a new government backed accelerator program, and each huge city or also has their own accelerator programs. But I think they're all missing the mark. The problem with startups in Vietnam is not that they can't raise the capital. That is one of the problems. I think the problem with Vietnamese startups is often more fundamental that they simply didn't have enough experience and the mental network yet to build a successful startup, even if they have money. So the success rate right now is very low, and foreign investors are concerned, rightfully sometimes, if they will see any kind of return if they invest in. Even if a venture capital firm has already invested a million or 2 million, it doesn't mean that the startup will be profitable simply because the CEO or the founder might not have the experience required to achieve product market fit and profitability or any kind of scale in the time frame that the VCs expect them to achieve.
Chad Oval, one of the partners at Mekong Capital, who you probably already know, Chad, said that one of the that the market's growing for great opportunity. Mekong is growing. They've got 65 full-time employees, so there's lots of opportunity, and he's been doing it for 30 years here in Vietnam. So one of the challenges is that uh, Vietnamese entrepreneurs don't look beyond the borders. They don't look like Israeli entrepreneurs and Singaporean entrepreneurs who come from very small markets and realize they got to go
Yeah,
global. Every product has got to be have global possibility, and so they don't look necessarily global. And they
yeah.
also have a lot of family members, and that makes it more challenging in terms of replacing non-performing family members with people who could take the business to the next level. Is that a challenge? How can that challenge be overcome?
Yes, I I heard this topic before from another investor friend, and I told him this. It depends on the business model. Like when you are in the B2B market and has a product that is very localized and the market is still growing, it might be that you haven't even covered or conquered 5% of the total market, right? So it might not make sense to expand globally. Like I talked to one of my friends who runs a CAM company in Ho Chi Minh for he builds ERP software for small medical clinics and doctor offices, and he's like the number two or three in the whole market. He lives quite well, and I asked him, "What do you think about going global?" And he says, "I don't need to. Why should I go global? Because I haven't even conquered 10% of the local market." So it really depends on the business model. If you are, on the other hand, like a consumer mobile app on a phone app, it makes sense to think globally and also design your app from the very first day so that you can go globally and simply switch the UI language from Vietnamese to English. Because like an AI app that allows you to chat to an ChatGPT or to generate images, it doesn't need to be localized. It doesn't make sense for them to be localized. So it always depends on the use case in the market, I think. But investors often like, from what I hear, a lot of VC investors like to find reasons to blame why something doesn't fit. But oftentimes it is more fundamental. The problem might be more fundamental. It could be that the team is simply not experienced enough to go global because you need to build a whole new office, hire completely new members, and this is often creates a lot of stress. So one of my friends, he was the CEO and founder of audiobook app, and there was an Indonesian fund who invested, I think, 10 million or $8 million in his app, and he had a huge launch party in Ho Chi Minh, and as a launch party alone cost like half a billion Vietnamese dong. And on the launch party, he talked about all the new markets he wants. He's going to enter in the next year. There was Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines. So this is what his investors wanted him to do. This is why they wrote the big checks, right? They said like, okay, you can build this company successfully in Vietnam, then you probably can also expand to other markets, right? Then your business is big enough. But just 6 months later, I heard that he closed the company, and I was shocked. Uh, I said to him, "You just rose $8 million. What happened? Did you run
Right.
out of money in 6 months?" So he said, "No." He said, "I'm in the hospital. It was too much pressure. I lost sleep. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat, and his body simply collapsed, simply due to the pressure. So sometimes it is like you can't take a tractor engine and put it on a motorcycle, right? So what I see often is like Vietnamese entrepreneurs are very good when they are working in a very small team and have like a small company and where they have to bootstrap, right? This is when they are very efficient. But they have sometimes a lot of young entrepreneurs have a problem when they receive their first $1 million check because they still don't really know what to do with it. So they imagine what a big company looks like. So they get a new big office that is far too large for them. They sign a far too long contract for the lease. They hire in a few new departments right off from LinkedIn and using headhunting, and to manage all the new employees, they have to hire management. So suddenly you have a new overhead that you didn't expect before. Suddenly you have a new head of marketing, head of sales, head of strategy, blah blah blah, and you still don't have a product. You only have expenses, right? So your revenue didn't grow, but your expenses grew faster than your revenue. So this is why a lot of startup companies, especially the first timers who who received their first check find themselves struggling with.
I think young entrepreneurs in particular feel uncomfortable pushing back against investors, telling them that they're not ready for this. And like you said, they have these visions of looking at Silicon Valley and see that they're
Yes,
in these gleaming office buildings, not realizing that
yes, right.
Jeff Bezos, when he was in Amazon, was in third-rate uh, office space and stayed that way for like a decade. And Steve
Yes,
Jobs didn't go build, big spaces. Like all the really successful guys were scaling, but very careful about how they spent their money. And the ones who didn't, well, they end up out of business. But it's all part of it's the investor's fault, right? I mean, if the investors are
yes,
entrepreneurs, they believe in growing incrementally and over time. But if they're finance people and they're telling their investors, "Oh my God, we're going to have a home run with this. We're going to give you a big payout soon,"
right.
then they're rushing it before it's actually ready. So, how does an entrepreneur, first of all, how does an entrepreneur evaluate and pick the right investor? Even if you need the money, it's not good because I've done 30 startups and I've worked with many entrepreneurs, and you want to pick the right partner to be with, or it's a disaster. And I've seen that not work out because the people said, you know what, if I can just get that money, I can get this thing take off. I know things
Right,
will just work itself out. So, what do you
right.
advise entrepreneurs when they're evaluating investors to get the right one?
Yes. I think that for seasoned entrepreneurs, like you often find in Silicon Valley, who already are at their fourth or fifth company, it is a different problem to solve. For Vietnamese founders who are often the first or second company, or, I think the problem is like in Vietnam, you don't really have a mentor network. So mentorship and the mentor network in the Western society is much, much more prevalent. When I worked in Germany, I had so many questions when I first started out in programming. So I went into all those chat rooms and talked about this. And I always had at least one guy who was willing for free to help me out with the hardest problems that I could find. And I found out that when I struggled with a problem I couldn't solve, it took me like a whole day, right, to figure it finally out. But when I came with the same problem to a guy who actually knew his stuff, he could solve this in 1 minute and explain me
Yeah.
why. So this is when I learned how important mentorship is. And I really loved how the people in the Western society are so openly trying to help each other, especially programmers. Like one day I had when I was had a startup in the image recognition app. I struggled with an implementation in CUDA. So what I did was I went on LinkedIn and I found some CUDA engineer from NVIDIA. And there was one in Spain, and I somehow I found his email, and I wrote in an email with my problem. And I kid you not, he sent me like a 10-page reply via email like 2 days later. And it was the most humbling experience I have found, because those people, they are doing it out of love, which says they really want to help other people. But
No
most
question.
people are far too afraid to simply ask for help, right? Because uh, in the Asian society, um, due to demographics and due to history, it is, and also because maybe due to the parents influencing the children later, it is less prevalent to simply ask for help because it shows that you are weak, or that you are not intelligent enough, or that you simply want something. So it is still new for a lot of founders to really ask for help without looking like they are begging for help or begging for money, right? So it is a lot of founders here in Vietnam are still uncomfortable simply asking each other out on a coffee, going to meet, because they don't expect that the other people really will try to help them.
I think just like failure, when I talk to my students, I tell them there's nothing wrong with failure. I mean, 30 years ago, people had a problem with that also in Silicon Valley and throughout the United States. And then once successful entrepreneurs who had failed talked about everything they learned through failure, and the failure
Right.
can be a badge of honor as long as you're getting better, not worse,
Yes.
that you've actually learned
Yes.
something from it. Uh, all of a sudden investors started to change the profile of what they were looking for from people who just had a one hit wonder to people who might have failed a couple of times and then asked
You're
them, what
right.
did you learn and how did you get better from it? And that actually reduced the amount of risk that they were taking. So, how do you make that change here in Vietnam and throughout Asia, where people look at failure as a learning experience that makes them better, not makes them embarrassed and feel that are unsuccessful?
Yes. So last time I talked to a startup founder who just failed his first $2 million company. He raised $2 million like 3 years ago, around during COVID, and his company went bust after like 1 or 2 years. And he said like he was devastated. He lost everything, his his family, his money, his house, and it was really hard for him to get back, and he really struggled. So by luck or by sheer coincidence, he met a guy who heard about his story, and he said, "Okay, I have this idea. Why don't we talk about it?" And this is when he like met one of my own mentors, and they talked about this, and then my mentor decided to invest in his new startup, new project. And when I now talked to the founder who already failed, you can still feel the burning passion, the fire, and his driven motivation to succeed again, but now also prove that his last time um, was not just a coincidence, but that he learned from it and then be better in the next startup. But I think, how do we teach failure in school is or that we don't teach failure in school is one of the things that I think could be changed. But also having like a network of former founders who talk to new and young founders would be very beneficial. This is why I'm trying to build a mentor network of former startup founders who already went through the hardships and who are willing. to connect and also talk to younger founders in high schools or universities because the lack of a strong mentor network is actually one of the reasons what's holding the Vietnamese startup economy still back. Because a lot of startup founders I meet in Vietnam, they are almost all learning the same lesson again for the first time because there's simply no podcast about failing and how to scale. What does bootstrapping mean? How should I spend my first $1 million, right? So nobody is talking about this because nobody actually has a good answer for this, right? So this is why I want to also create a startup program, and I'm working right now with a few universities in Vietnam on I think next year semester to maybe implement some kind of mini module about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's what we're all about at VinUniversity is working on these between our eLab and the work I'm doing starting the first national high school entrepreneurship competition. And I've been teaching high school entrepreneurs last fall on Sunday mornings from 10 to 11. And now I'm expanding that program. So I'm hoping we're going to get a
That's
chance to work
great.
more with you to make Vietnam even stronger in this area because the more entrepreneurial startups we have, the better the job market is. And instead of losing 70% of our college grads to other countries, we'll be able to keep them here. And instead of mass producing other people's product, we'll create our own product. And hence,
Right.
we don't have to worry about tariffs for the future
Yes.
because
Yes.
we'll be the ones dictating this. So I think that's all great. What's the biggest mistake you ever made in one of your ventures, and what did you learn from it?
Mm, yes. I tried to find a big mistake as in one of my startups that I make, but I couldn't find a very big mistake. I make a lot of smaller mistakes, but nothing like critical because I always try to get the big decisions, the important decisions right. So once you know why you do something and you have a fundamental concept of your plan that allows you to become successful, then I think the big mistakes might not occur. But I learn a lot from mistakes from other people. So I really like to read like books from former startup founders. I started reading about them during the 90s when the first .com startups appeared and what they did wrong. And when after reading almost all books on startup failure that I could find in the 90s and 2000s, and I felt pretty good that, okay, now I know where the big potholes are, where I don't want to land. And I said this to my one of my technical co-founders, and he said me one thing that I still remember, that, yeah, you might know what their mistakes were, but you will simply do new mistakes.
That's right. That's right. But
Right.
it's still good to hear what other people learned from theirs. And when you before you do something major, do you consult with the people in your own organization and do you bounce ideas off of maybe mentors or advisory board or board of directors?
Yes, of course I do this, but oftentimes I found out that um, through my creative, this is my personal process. I'm a very creative person, so I have like every day I have like two or three new ideas for a startup.
I'm
So I
just like
have to
you.
write them down. So I have to write them down, and I have a process where I have a folder of all my startups, and I have category A, B, C. A is like idea, just a prototype. B is like the first prototype or after market research, and C is actually when I actually want to launch. And it takes about 12 months on average from a project in folder A, category A, to go to C. So, for example, Tiger List, when I first finished my first prototype, design prototype, I received an email from my domain provider who said, "Yeah, you have to extend your domain because it has been 1 year after you registered your Tiger List domain." And this is when I realized, oh, I started working on this 12 months ago, but I didn't even realize because only the last 3 months was when I really went into full production, actually started thinking about it. So having those three folders and having like a process where you have like a big checklist and then just assign them points to all the ideas can help you a bit of building clarity on which project and products to pursue and which not. Because I often find that like the research I do for one project that I might not even start actually helped me immensely on another project that I started later because I already did all the research previously. So this is how I have like a huge library of ideas and research where I store them.
When you're hiring people for a startup in the ones that you've run, what's the profile of the ideal people in the beginning? Because I think the skill sets and the type of people you hire as the business grows changes. But when you're launching in the beginning, what's the profile of the kind of people you look to hire?
Yeah. So in the beginning, you are very restricted on, financial assets. So what you want to do is hire a small group, but very flexible and smart people who can actually get stuff done. They don't need to be specialists in the very area, but they need to be smart enough on how to learn to what they need to learn, right? So I hire like a core group of three generalists, but with only small overlapping areas. So, like if I have a tech project, I need developers. So I will hire a front-end designer, but who can also do back-end development. I will hire a back-end developer, but who can also do a bit of mobile development, for example. So I cover more areas with fewer number of people, but who are all very smart people and can actually learn what they need to learn in order to finish the product and get me to my first base and my first phase.
AI has become hugely used on a daily basis. In fact, by the way, I learned something this past week. I was using chat and I asked it a question about how President Trump's tariffs are going to affect Vietnam. And it said former President Trump. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
wait a minute, what happened to President Trump? And it turns out that their data sets stopped in June of
Yes.
2024, over a year ago.
Yes. Yes.
And it
Yes.
turns out that when I went on Gemini and another platform, that all three of them, their data sets stopped at June 2024, and that the only one
Yeah.
that was still current was Kronk. And that was suggested to me by somebody I deal with here in Vietnam. So how is AI going to affect how investors invest and evaluate companies that they're looking at to put money into?
Yes. I think especially when we look at the tech industry, AI is a very important factor that VCs now consider because a lot of investors see AI not like the intelligent platform or a tool. They see it more like this is a way for me to squeeze more production and more code and have a very small team do what used to be a very big team. So what actually happens is like the investment ticket size for non-hardware startups is shrinking, except for people who actually do like for foundation models or build completely new AI models. Most of the startup teams are now becoming smaller, and the investors expect them to be AI first. So, what does AI first mean? Yes, this term is like 3 months old. AI first. So, what the heck is the AI first company? So, it turns out that when AI came out, a lot of younger developers, they started to use AI not just as a code generation tool, they use it like a code companion or co-founder. So they have like they build like their own AI agent that cannot just write code and push the code to production. They have like their own AI agent to make business decisions. An agent to write a business plan, an agent to write um, investment memos. So all those things that used to be like the work of a CEO is now outsourced to AI, right? So they use AI like an operation system, kind of like we use Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. They use AI to run the whole company. And this is what they call AI first. But I think that it is actually just one of the tools that can help you and also increase productivity, but it also creates very unrealistic expectations. So how big can like a team of 10 people really scale a company? Maybe if you have a very simple tech product, more a mobile app, for example, it might work. But once you have like a real business where you need hotline, email support, and actually really people who are angry at you and want to talk to a real person, it is very difficult for those startups to actually take care of the customer. So there are a lot of limitations they realize very early. You know, for example, one of the startups I know, they have a meeting to transcriber AI, and when you they have a button where you can send in email feedbacks when the app crashes, etc. Right? So I wrote them after the app crashed a comment and told them that the app keeps crashing when in this case. And I received an email immediately after like 30 seconds, and I knew it was AI. So I knew that nobody's taking care of it. Nobody's going to read this, right? And like 3 days later, another AI written email is sent to me. So I know that there are very big limitations to how much a real team of 10 or 30 people can do, right? But VCs are pushing the expectations that might really be driven by FOMO and not really rooted in reality.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, what's your final piece of advice? And I so appreciate the time you've spent with me today. What's your final piece of advice to entrepreneurs looking to raise capital in Vietnam and throughout Asia? What should they be doing in 2025 that will allow them to be successful?
Yes. I think that there's a major shift in the investment industry happening right now. I think that the business model of VCs, where an investment firm expects a 10x or 20x return, soon won't be realistic anymore. There might be use cases where this can still happen, but I think due to AI, the effect of AI on the tech industry will be that software will be more and more commoditized. So it used to be like when you have a lot of developers writing software, you had like an edge, right? You had an advantage compared to in a smaller firm with less developers. But using AI, anybody can write software very quickly right now. So the 10x, 20x return will happen even rarer than they used before. So I think that VCs are going to collapse and they will merge more into a form of like mini private equity, where more PE firms will replace VCs over time. So PE plays a completely different game compared to VC. P plays a long-term game and is more in M&A. So I think for the future in 2025, the best investor might be not an investor that is traditionally an investor, but like a small to medium business. So small, medium business owners in Vietnam have a lot of money, and a lot of startup founders don't know this. And the problem is that nobody's building the bridge and connecting them, those business owners, to real startups in Vietnam. And I think that if we can mobilize those business owners and let them become angel investors and tell them yet instead of like throwing money at startups randomly or technology or new ideas, why not choose a startup and turn them into a strategic partner who can build prototypes and innovate and do stuff that you want to do, but you don't have the time and the manpower to do.
I agree with you totally. I actually talked about this in Latin America, the same thing for the wealthy families, saying you already have all the distribution. You can create quick winners as opposed to VCs where they're looking at 10, 2,000 deals, invest in 10, and only one out of 2,000 is a hit. You can easily make almost all of these ventures that you get involved in because of your capability profitable. Maybe not like you said, 20 times return, but still a good return. I thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And I think entrepreneurs really got a lot out of it. I look forward to your Tiger List being very successful and for us to partner with you in making Vietnam one of the focal points of entrepreneurship, not just in Asia, but around the world, where they look at us like Israel, Singapore, and the United States.
Great, thank you a lot.